This podcast is with Anna Gonzalez. I met Anna early in her career when she was one of the founders of Youth Climate Labs. She's fantastic. She won one of the top 30 under 30 for sustainability, and I really hope you enjoy the conversation with Anna.
Welcome back to the Career Conversations for a Cooler Planet podcast series. I'm Prina Budising, and today I'm joined by Anna Gonzalez Guerrero, Senior Manager Climate and Cities at Mars Discovery District. Could you just tell me a little bit about your current role, what a typical day-to-day is in this position?
I work at Mars Discovery District, which is North America's largest urban innovation hub. We support entrepreneurs create a better world, and within that we have different verticals in the areas that we work with. I work in the climate one, and specifically I'm leading our adaptation and resilience practice, supporting ventures and entrepreneurs advance solutions that help prevent, prepare, recover, and respond to the impacts of climate change. What I usually do is a coordination of different elements and people and things to ideally support the development of more of these type of solutions across the Canadian ecosystem.
That's very cool. So what led you to working in this field? Yes, this is what I want to do, this is the direction I want to head in, or did it just sort of happen?
I think as a whole climate, I for sure had a moment. When I was younger, I knew I wanted to work in the environment or climate space to overall support solutions that targeted to those that are impacted the most by the effects of climate change. Through your career, there's different opportunities that come up and kind of start shaping where you might want to end up in. I wouldn't say it was a specific moment through undergrad or grad school that led to this particular role, but more so recognizing where the space is at, what we need most, and where I might be able to best fit my skills with the needs that currently exist.
Thank you for sharing. You did undergrad and graduate school. Would you mind talking a little bit about that? Did you go into graduate school right after?
No, it took a while. I did undergrad from 2010 to 2015 at the University of Waterloo. I studied environment and business. Then I worked in a different variety of spaces and sectors, but primarily I was a co-founder of a nonprofit youth climate lab with a friend of mine, Dominique Suri. We worked on that for a number of years. Once I graduated my youth space, when I turned around 30, I went back to school in 2021. I had a 6-7 year gap in between undergrad and graduate school. I think was good for me. I wanted to have a bit more space to think through what it was if I did want to go into grad school and what I wanted to look into and how I wanted to approach graduate school at that point.
I think there's so much pressure when you graduate to either hop into something right away or kind of know exactly what you're looking for. That's really cool that you took some time off. I know you went to the University of Oxford for your master's. What led you there? Because that's quite a ways from the University of Waterloo.
I was interested in looking at programs abroad for a little while. Yeah, the UK has shorter programs, if I'm honest. I was also just more keen, given that I was a little bit later in my career and had waited a bit. I wanted something that was a bit more practical and that I could look into just in 1 year. I looked at different programs and I was fortunate enough to receive a scholarship at the University of Oxford, which helped me make that decision. And I went into a program that was new at the time. We were the first cohort of this program called Sustainability, Enterprise, and the Environment, which was still quite aligned with what I had done in undergrad. Given that there was enough time and distance, I figured it was still worthwhile. The program itself was interesting. I think what I gained the most out of that was through my thesis and working with my supervisor at the time was a really great learning experience just to dive deeper into a topic that I was interested in, more on the adaptation resilience front, specifically how to mobilize more capital for cities to do adaptation resilience. A combination of wanting to go back to school and doing it in a way that allowed me to explore some topics that I was interested in.
That's very cool. So how did being abroad kind of shape your goals and perspectives around the industry or just your career path in general?
I was already abroad for Waterloo. I am originally from Mexico. I was born and raised in Mexico. A lot of my career has been away from home. Community and city has a different approach to how they're tackling climate change. Learning a little bit more about the European context is always helpful, but being exposed to other folks. It was a relatively international cohort, also just recognizing where other people were coming from and what they were seeing help shape some of those ideas or thinking. Ultimately, I've been very privileged and lucky enough to be able to see different perspectives through undergrad, through co-ops and grad school that complements and informs a lot of the ways and approaches that I take into climate.
I think that's really important because like the fight against climate change isn't just like based in one country, like we're all in this together, like no matter where we come from. When you graduated undergrad, what did your work sort of look like then? Like
I actually took a year off. I moved back home and I just wanted to have some space and time to figure out what my next steps were, which I had the ability and privilege to do so. I'm very, very grateful for that time. My first job was with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in Ottawa. I was working with their climate team, so supporting a number of municipalities with their climate mitigation and adaptation plans. Then I moved into a different position at FCM, looking more at international development side of things, working with some international municipalities in their local economic development, sustainability, and governance efforts. And through the management of an innovation fund, that's where I started looking a little bit more at the capital side of things. And in parallel, I mentioned earlier, but I had co-founded and became the managing director of Youth Climate Lab, a youth for youth nonprofit operating globally, but headquartered at the time in Ottawa, that was working with and it continues to work with young people in the climate policy and climate finance space to help them increase their capacities, but also better understand the different spaces and that impact them. I did that for a number of years. It was a really wonderful experience. It was a lot of work. I got to work with some really fantastic people, both in our team and externally. That is really what shaped a lot of my work and thinking.
in regards to Youth Climate Lab, was this a dream of yours or how did this come to be?
No, there's less of like long time dreams and more like opportunities and needs that emerge and present themselves. I didn't even know you could co-found a nonprofit when I was growing up. Generally, thematically, what I was interested in, and Dominique and I identified some gaps that we were noticing both, and noticing the lack of youth representation in those spaces at the time. I was working more at the local level with cities and also noticing at the grassroots community level, there was a lot of work being done by young people, but not necessarily compensated, recognized, or supported. It wasn't that we wanted to start a nonprofit, it was more that we wanted to solve for an issue that we were noticing. I wouldn't necessarily say it was always the dream. If anything, it was a lot messier and harder. It's rewarding, and I'm really glad we did it, but it more so emerged from a noticed gap and our maybe delusional, maybe grounded in real life thought that we could get something done. Founded it in 2017. It's under new leadership and it's doing really well with new folks. It is exciting to see it grow and maintain after we left.
Did you jump right into that being a full-time focus when you were starting off with it?
No, we couldn't afford that. Monique was the first full-time employee, then we had some other contractors, and I jumped in probably 2 years into it full time. I went part time at my job, my other permanent job at FCM. I made the full jump at the beginning of 2020. It was tiring for everyone involved, just like myself doing multiple roles, but also the team that was holding the fort without having me full time. It took some time and funding to get it done, but we eventually managed to have a pretty thorough, solid team of staff that were working full time on it.
Yeah, and you work with youth like all over the world, right? It was 70 plus countries I had read, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, we were able to do sessions mentioned in different programs that impacted or reached youth in those countries. We didn't have offices or like programs in all of them, but we were working on different projects and programs that reach youth across about 70 countries.
That's incredible. Do you still play a role within that organization?
No. I'm always available and in good relationship with the team now, but it is also important to know when to step back and let other newer young leadership take on that role. We always saw that that organization intended to be for youth and by youth. It is important to know when it's in good hands, and let other people shine and take their own direction and do what they need to. But I'm always available for chats or support, but they're doing it on their own.
Yesterday was International Women's Day. How has your experience as a woman in this field been?
They're disproportionately impacted by the impacts of climate change, and women oftentimes bear the brunt of developing, designing, implementing solutions, maybe also getting paid less while doing so. Inevitably, it impacts our experiences and how we show up to work and the type of work that we do. I've had, for the most part in my career, supporting mentors and workspaces where other women have collaborated, taught me, and participated in my own growth and development. I've had it relatively easy in terms of like the privileges that I hold in a country like Canada, where a lot of this is oftentimes taken for granted. I know and I hope it always informs the way that I approach solution development and how we support those that are impacted most in climate.
Do you have any advice for women who are interested in this field, or maybe like me, like starting out in this field? What would you say to them?
Think of what really moves you and you want to do. This is a marathon, not a sprint, and it is heavy work. I think climate, as you're working on the mitigation, adaptation, solution, policy side of things, there's a lot of heaviness in grief and recognizing there are losses that are happening day to day. So just finding what really moves you and what will get you excited to be working in this space is important. So going with the trends or what's popular now or later, they change often, they change a lot. So just understanding what your interests are, where your skills lie, and ideally there's an intersection between those and what is most needed, and then just finding that kind of like niche space between the skills and needs. By needs, I mean overall community, global ecosystem needs. It is heavy work, and so finding your communities, people that think like you, that look like you, where it's women, other folks that can relate to your lived experiences. Almost as important as finding people that don't look and think like you, and yeah, just recognizing that there are a lot of bridges to be built amongst how we all think, but having a good community, whereas it's friends, mentors, advisors to like fall back on when things get heavy. I've had the privilege to have a number of those that I feel like I can call at different times and get some support. Julie, including one of them, who connected us, who provided a lot of support to myself and Dominique as we were trying to figure out Youth Climate Lab's kind of transition period, recognizing that there's women in the space that have done this before and that are hopefully always open to supporting and sharing some of what they've learned.
I love to hear it. That's a great answer. You talk about like that heaviness and grief within the role. How do you deal with that in your day-to-day within your role? How do you deal with those stressors?
Not Too Late, edited by Rebecca Solnit. It's a really beautiful compilation of essays that touch on the heaviness that I keep referring to in climate work and how it is not too late to still continue to work on and choose to work on these things, but position it as like hope being more of a choice, continuing to fight for what we think is right. To me, the intersectionality of issues that surround climate, which includes women's rights, sovereignty, a more decolonial lens, just all play together, and they are all heavy, but they're also all quite important, and we keep seeing it in kind of every aspect of life. No matter where you turn around, it's going to show up. So I understand where my skills are, where my interests lie, and where I think there is a big need, and trying to like dedicate my time and energy to that. It helps me feel like I'm doing something, which kind of like lessens the anxiety or grief around what it is that we're experiencing. There's heavier days than others. Action and community that help me feel more grounded, excited about the work. I often refer to and go back to, it's called Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Mary Brown. And she also speaks about the ability to find joy in the midst of working through oppressive systems and changing systems that have not benefited most through history, and how to ideally be able to find joy and happiness in those glimpses of spaces. Otherwise, it's heavy work and we won't do it.
It's important for ourselves to be sustainable so we can carry on that important duty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you
Yeah,
for
so
sharing
taking
that.
care of yourself, taking care of people around you, finding a community, and still not letting the like magnitude of the challenge be overwhelming to the point of no action, knowing when to stop. I mentioned I took a break after university. Our bodies and minds need some rest in between all of this, especially when doing work that touches on topics that are near and dear to our hearts.
You've worked at a number of different companies in your career, so what was that like? Did you
What has guided and moved me is like I understand the values and principles and themes that I'm interested in, and I like tend to like try to find a couple of like keywords that I know I want to look for in a different like job role, volunteer position, what it is that I want to focus on thematically and how I want to feel in those like spaces. And if I can find things that align with that, then that's enough for me to like move to a different role. I think I'm also always interested and genuinely want to learn more about like new things. There are points at roles and jobs that like you've reached a limit of how much you can learn or do in a particular role, and it's not always doable or manageable to grow in the same organization. Youth Climate Lab being an obvious example, but I think like both myself and co-founder Dominique had done what we could have in the space and the time, and like with while still maintaining what the organization needed. There's a lot of value in knowing when you've done what you needed to do, and when you've like given the best of what you have, and then moving into different things that might be more expensive or challenging in different ways, but yeah, being able to do so. It's easier to draw those like threads and parallels in hindsight, and it's overwhelming to try to map it out when you're like in university or trying to decide what your next step is, as long as it feels values aligned and it is something that is contributing roughly to the theme or areas that you're most interested in. Like, don't worry too much. There you can always move and you can always change, and there's a lot of time to move around and figure out what you like. You never know what you're gonna learn at a role that may not have seemed as like the perfect ideal role at the beginning. My first job being with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, I cared about cities. I had worked a little bit through my co-ops, but I didn't know as much. That first job really kind of cemented why now a lot of my focus and work has grounded at the local government. Who knows where my career would be if like that first job was more on the like private sector or like different elements. It may sound like some of the people in like their later careers knew exactly what they were doing at every point, but the reality is that I don't think many do. I certainly did not. It came as a result of like being prepared, being aware, noticing some gaps, and like jumping into those at the right time.
That's great to hear, because I think sometimes it can be a bit scary when everyone's like, where are you going? What are you doing? And you're like, I'm not sure.
I remember exactly feeling that. Like the next decision was like ultimately going to determine the rest of my career. I wish I could like go back and tell myself that it's like fine. It is important and you should consider it like carefully, obviously, but ultimately, whatever experience it is, you're going to learn something, good or bad. I did some co-ops that I really did not like, and that in itself was as valuable as knowing what I do like now. None of those decisions are that permanent. You can always shift, even if you do have to stay, which there are many reasons why people do. There's some learning and growth in all of them, and you can always use it as part of like kind of your overall career growth path and learn through.
How has like social media or like even AI now more prevalent shaped your role or your roles?
It definitely has helped and shaped more of like later stages. Like we did a lot of our work and engagement with young folks through Youth Climate Lab on social media. Yeah, connected and collaborated with people across the world through that. Like there, it has been an advantage at certain points in my career, but I'd say on my like day to day, probably less so. Um, AI is an interesting one. I personally hate it. I know I need to find a midpoint of recognizing where it has a helpful role in the space and where it doesn't. Just from an environmental standpoint, from a human rights and ethics standpoint, really hard to justify the particularly for climate related like programs or like efforts. I find that dichotomy a little bit hard to reconcile when working in the climate space and using AI for like simple things. I am seeing it a lot. Some of the solutions that we're seeing to like support through the accelerator for adaptation and resilience technologies do touch on like AI for like modeling or to interpret Earth observation, more like data that's happening like at different layers and levels across the communities and nationally and internationally and how it all looks. There are some positive uses for AI, not blind to the reality of how it can be leveraged for good. I worry that we don't have enough guardrails or governance set up to do that well. In the meantime, we're just using up a lot of resources to fuel it. I think it's going to be quite present. It's exponentially grown, obviously, in the past little while. So it is about like catching up and seeing how it can be leveraged for good. But I still worry a little bit of the actual implications of it and the ones that we understand and the ones that we don't. Particularly for, yeah, those that are often disproportionately impacted by all our bad decisions.
I noticed too now when you're applying for jobs, sometimes there's like a little checkbox and you choose if you want them to like screen your application with AI or not.
I've reviewed many CVs through my career. The ones in the last year that are obviously AI do show up as such. Like I manually, and it's not screened through AI, I read all. And it is very noticeable to me as someone that was reading CVs before ChatGPT existed and now. It is very obvious when it is someone that put in the time and effort into writing the application and when it comes out of a generated AI. There's still, for those companies and organizations that do manually review all of the CVs, it is still worthwhile putting in a little bit of effort to say this cover letter stands out because it was written by a human. I'm not saying I 100% can spot when they are AI or not, but the ones that are very obviously AI, I think there is some mental deduction because they didn't put in as much of a like effort into like someone else that did that spent some time sharing their experiences and why they think they're good for the role.
What are you most looking forward to as you continue on this role with Mars?
We're in the process of selecting and announcing our final cohort of ventures. We're going to be working with 8 to 10 ventures. I'm looking forward to seeing who the final group is and how they need support and what type of impacts they can have over the next year and beyond with the technologies that they're developing.
That sounds very exciting. What has been your favorite part since you've been in this role with this company?
I like the kind of ability to design and develop new things. So we didn't have an adaptation resilience practice before, and it is something that I was interested in and had the opportunity to work in before. So the space and openness to design a new program that is still in line with what the organization's doing and working towards being able to kind of see it from idea into reality has always been exciting for me and cool. And it was very similar with like Youth Climate Lab. I kind of like the idea to implementing side of things and just figuring out the different challenges and hiccups that come along the way is just fun in some ways, but also can be overwhelming. So I'm happy to have had the supports that I've had in the past. I mentioned Julie, many others that can kind of help inform and shape how I think of some of these problems, and then being able to apply that to new contexts is has been fun. She, to me, is an example of like the huge value of like mentors and advisors in the ecosystem and people that know better, more,
Yeah. Yeah, no.
and helping navigate and guide, yeah, different points in their career advance.
Maybe like what was one of the most memorable things you've had like a mentor tell you, if you're comfortable sharing?
Whenever I think about a mentor, I inevitably think of Shauna Sylvester, who's the lead founder and convener at Urban Climate Leadership. We met through a board of directors. We were both part of the board of the Tamarack Institute through the last almost 6 years. She's been an incredible support from random calls here and there, to dinners when we're like in the same city, knowing that there is someone that I can call with like questions has always just, yeah, felt good. And I think of her as a woman that has been in the climate ecosystem for a while in Canada and knows it so well, that whenever I'm having doubts or questions about my own role in the space, it's good to remind myself that there's others that have paved the way for women in climate across the country.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Is there any advice, I know we talked about it briefly before, that you would give yourself when you were graduating undergrad?
Yeah, I mean, it's easier said than done. Don't stress as much. I remember how big and like almost overwhelming the like options were. Maybe a reframe around like how exciting the amount of options that exist is good. Remembering like nothing, almost nothing is like that permanent. Even if the first role that you do decide to take on is not exactly what you wanted, in 5 years, that's going to be at the bottom of your CV. Going into each job and role with an idea of what you want to learn and what you want to get out of it and how you want this to like help you get it. It's really difficult to map out from like the ground up what it is that you want to be doing. Ideally, go in with an open mind and an open heart, and things can happen, and you might learn more things about what you're interested in while you're on the job and on the new roles. It is slightly less serious than you think it is when you're in undergrad, and it'll be okay. And in a few years, yeah, it'll feel like it makes more sense.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. So thank you for sharing that. I really value connection with people and hearing other people's stories. So it's been lovely to hear your story today, and learning like how you've gone through everything. So thank you for your time and for bearing with all the emails for scheduling this. I appreciate that a lot.